Welcome to episode 3 of The Player and the Journalist. Along with Jillian and Reilly, I'm David Vick. In this episode, we will discuss fifth-year transfers, including Andie Aldave and Paige, and new rules for the 2022 NCAA season. Episode 3, how's it going?
Good. Excited to be back. We have some fun things to talk about.
For sure. Had some big news come out since our last episode. That's where we'll start. Andie Aldave leaving Notre Dame for North Carolina. Your thoughts on that?
I was a little shocked, honestly. I think, UNC always brings in top transfers, obviously, because they're such a powerhouse. But I know Andie Aldave, she's had such a good run at Notre Dame. And I think, it's as a fifth year, I could have never pictured myself leaving, but I also understand, Notre Dame struggled the past couple of years. So I'm sure she's ready for a fresh start. And, this is her last go, her last season, her career is ending after this. So I was shocked, but I think she's going to do great at UNC.
It's interesting that you say that Notre Dame struggled, which they did just because the expectations are so high, but they've been in the top 10 for the last 2 years. They were in the top 5 for most of this past season. So Notre Dame struggling is a great year for almost every other school. So it's very interesting that the expectations. For me, I was definitely surprised. Notre Dame, they're coming off a great season, and you could you could argue, we kind of touched on this in the first episode. We have a little bit different opinions on this, I guess, but one can make the case that they were a Final Four team if Andie Aldave didn't get injured, and she was herself the whole season. And so going into next season, you have Casey Choma, who I think is one of the most exciting players to watch. I love watching her. Her energy and passion is amazing. And then Bridget Dehan is coming back for a fifth year. So it was just surprising to me that, like you said, she decided to leave, excuse me, excuse me, for her last year. And I feel like the the truth in it, based on her decision, is that she just doesn't believe Notre Dame has as good of a chance to win it all as North Carolina, which you can't fault her for that. So I want to know how her Notre Dame teammates feel, because that's got to be a tough one. She's been there for 4 years, and she announces her transfer just a little bit before the start of the fall semester. So it's just interesting timing as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think struggling was probably an aggressive word choice, but I think coming from the ACC, the bar is set so high and they are such a talented team. They always have been. But I think it's like getting over that hump, right? They make playoffs every year. They make it pretty far. But I think it's the past couple of years they've fell short in the Elite Eight round. So struggling might have been too aggressive, but I do think that they're a great team. I think with her leaving, um, they're losing not only great talent but also leadership. So that's something that they're going to have to look to replace in that sense, in that category. But you mentioned Casey Choma, and I think she has more experience under her belt, so she's going to step up. Madison Ahern, they still have big name people who are very talented players and are all about Notre Dame lacrosse. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who sort of steps up and makes more of a name for themselves. But yeah, I would definitely want to know what her teammates are thinking, what the coaches are thinking, and if there's any other changes going on that we just don't know about yet.
Do you think that her leaving Notre Dame shows that for her to win a national championship, she's not going to be able to be the best player on the team? Like nothing against her and her talent level, she's amazing, but Notre Dame couldn't get over the hump with her, and obviously she was injured last year, but she was the best player on the team. You could make that case for at least 2 years, maybe. They had some other great players, but I don't. Just for me personally, I think she's a great player, but I just feel like with her leaving Notre Dame, it just shows that she can't be the best player on a championship team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. What you're getting into when you're transferring to UNC. Everybody's a rock star on that team. Everybody was the best of the best coming in from high school. So I think it definitely speaks to the fact that she's ready and wanting to win a national championship. And I don't think she thought that she was going to be able to get it done at Notre Dame. So I think that's her accepting whatever role she steps into and is offered at UNC. I mean, I think as a transfer, you definitely still have to earn your spot, no matter what your name is, where you come from, along with incoming freshmen. So I think she's ready to work hard. I don't think she's expecting to be handed anything. I think she's a very hardworking player. So, but I do think she's ready and wanting to win a national championship. I think anybody who plays at the Division I level, that's their ultimate goal, and I think they'll do whatever it takes in order to reach that stage.
I'm curious to know what your expectations are for her. And it's very interesting because they have Jamie Ortega, who is going to be a Tewaaraton finalist. That's like a guarantee. They have Caitlin Wurzberger, who came on really strong at the end of last season when Ortega missed a few games. So kind of got a glimpse of what she's going to be this season with no Katie Hogue. She's going to have a much bigger role. And obviously, like she's just so hyped up and deservedly so. They have Olivia Dirks coming in, who's another All-American. They have Scotty Rose Growney, who I'm super high on. I think she's underrated. She's a great player. They have Ali Mastriani coming back. I mean, you can just go down the list. I mean, Taylor Moreno is going to be in goal. They're just going to be so stacked. And we kind of saw this play out last year when Kerrigan Miller transferred from USC. And she had an okay season, but she didn't have the type of seasons she had at USC. She just wasn't depended on to produce like she was out west. And so it's going to be interesting to see what the role is and the expectations are within the team for Andie Aldave, because she's no longer going to be the best player. She's no longer going to be who everyone is focusing on. So she might have a better season because of that, because everyone is going to be focusing on other players. But what do you think her season and the expectations will look like for her?
Yeah, I mean, I think first things first, she's sort of coming off an injury still. I know all the details, but she's playing with a brace for the majority of the season. So I think first and foremost, she needs to take care of that and sort of get her speed back, get her agility back. It's heartbreaking having to come back from a knee injury like that. I've had several teammates who, it's a long process and you just have to trust the process. But I think for her, I think heading into or joining a team like UNC, the players are getting better every day and they're elevating the bar every day. So I think, in terms of my expectations, I think that's just, she's going to have to stay hungry. And, I think complacency is a really good way to describe it. I think, you were talking about Jamie Ortega earlier, and I think she's a type of player who is constantly evolving her game and constantly getting better along with the entire rest of their roster. Nobody's ever satisfied with their game. And I think for her, that's something that's going to be super important, joining their team is just, always raising the bar, always elevating your skill and your game and your stick work. I think that's something that the UNC coaching staff definitely expects out of their players, especially being the powerhouse that they are and the reputation that they have, making it to the Final Four the past couple of years. I think that's something that they pride themselves on. And I think she's going to have to be ready to step up to the plate and, work hard alongside her teammates.
So just to kind of put a wrap on this before we go to Paige Petty, I think the word you used was a great way to look at it, complacency. And I feel like with North Carolina, I just interviewed Scotty Rose Growney a few days ago, and coming off how last season ended and the year before that, I feel like with her senior class, so many fifth years, there's going to be no type of complacency because they realize this is their last year to get it done. So I feel like entering this fall, North Carolina is probably going to be the hungriest team and the most motivated team. I mean, the sting of defeat hurts, but then when you lose it in the biggest game of your life, which for her class was the biggest game because they never played a national championship. So it's going to be very interesting to watch them. So I don't think there's going to be any complacency, and I feel like that'll help a player like Andie Aldave and even an Olivia Dirks, who's coming from Penn State, who's just not used to nothing against the Big Ten last season or the season before that, but it's just a different kind of competition in the ACC, different type of intensity. And the conferences are just better, or is just better. There's better players. So sticking with the ACC, we have Paige Petty, who transferred to Pittsburgh, a little closer to home. She's from New Jersey, played at Virginia Tech for 4 years, came out with a bang her freshman season when Virginia Tech was breaking all types of school records. They went to the ACC tourney, they went to the NCAA tourney, and then it kind of fell off. But she was still great in her own right. So what do you think of her going to Pittsburgh, staying in conference but changing schools?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really exciting. I'm excited to watch her at Pitt. I think that was a really smart decision for her because she is now stepping into a really some really big shoes, but I think it's like a good opportunity for her, to help build this program. And she definitely has the talent and the leadership experience coming from Virginia Tech. She was their star, one of their most hardworking players. And I think, as a fifth year, wherever you're playing, you leave it all out on the field. So I think she's going to have, a lot of people looking up to her. I think she's going to, be able to continue on, being such a stud. And I think she's going to help Pitt, get on the map and, staying within the ACC too. I think that's a really cool opportunity because it is the most competitive league. And I think, for her, she knows what it takes to compete at that level. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see her step in and, sort of lead the charge for Pitt.
For sure. So with her, I really wasn't surprised that she transferred. What I found interesting was when she shared with me that she knew she was going to transfer before last season even started. So she visited Pittsburgh in December, I think she said. And so that was just interesting to me. So it was already premeditated. She knew that she was wanting to leave. It wasn't because they didn't have the greatest season or because they had a coaching change. She said she just wanted to go back up north. She loved her time at VT, but she wanted to go back up north for her last season. And so for me, I'm more excited than anything with her transfer because the ACC is already amazing. But now you have Pittsburgh, who I feel like they're going to be the storyline going into 2022. It's going to be their first season. They have all sorts of ACC transfers. They were like the place to go this offseason. So they have a ton of Syracuse players, Virginia Tech transfers. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. They also have a goalie, Paulina DeFada from Elon, who I'm very high on. She's a very good player. And so I really don't have much to say on Paige Petty transferring other than I'm excited to see her. It's going to be a little different seeing her in the Pittsburgh colors in their uniforms, but it's going to be cool to see that. And I feel like you said, she's going to be a leader on that team because she knows what it takes to not only compete in the ACC, but to win. She's been in the ACC for 4 years. She's got more experience than anyone on their roster. She's the biggest name on their roster. So I feel like a lot is going to be on her shoulders, but it's also a very exciting opportunity for her and Pittsburgh as well. It can be a very mutually beneficial partnership for as long as it lasts, which won't be too long, just a year, less than a year. So very interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about, there being other ACC transfers on the roster. I think that's going to be really cool for her too, because she had some stud players alongside her at Virginia Tech, but I think they were younger players this past season. And so I think, she's going to be able to be that much better if she has those types of players surrounding her at Pitt, Syracuse transfers. And I think she's going to be able to, highlight their talent and her talent at once. So I think it's going to be really cool to see, how she grows from this experience and having talent surrounding her talent.
It's going to be interesting. I'm glad you brought up the talent because no offense to the talent at Virginia Tech this past season, but they just weren't very good. I know they had a lot of struggles with COVID and she was injured. But if you look at all the ACC teams, which this probably isn't a fair comparison, but you could argue they were the worst ACC team. I would take Louisville over them, Virginia. I mean, so I don't want to bash them. They just didn't have the talent last year, but it's going to be interesting this upcoming season because they have a lot of transfers, but a lot of the transfers they got were backups, either at Syracuse or at Virginia. So it's going to be interesting to see how much talent Pittsburgh does end up having and that they can surround Paige Petty with, because I would say the only lock for Pittsburgh going into the fall is, Paige Petty's going to start, she's going to produce, and then everyone else is kind of a question mark. You have some freshmen that enrolled last season and they were just practicing the whole year, but you didn't get to see them up against D1 competition. I think they had a scrimmage against Slippery Rock, which is either D2 or D3. But so it's going to be very interesting to see how much talent Pitt actually does have. I do have faith in their coaching staff. I think they're going to be amazing. I've heard nothing but good things about their coaching staff, but I hope they have the talent that Paige Petty is deserving of for her final season.
No, definitely. Definitely. I'm excited to watch that too.
Awesome. So now we will transition to the rule changes, which some very interesting rule changes. Got some people heated, had some hot takes, especially with the changing from two halves to four quarters. Let's start with that. That's probably the biggest one, just because of, I don't know, it makes it more like men's lacrosse than women's lacrosse. But what are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. I sort of like it, to be honest. I think that it's definitely going to change, the pace of the game, and there's going to be obviously some more pauses. And we always talked about at BC, whenever there's a timeout, there's always some type of momentum shift. If there's a team, who's down by a few and calls a timeout, they obviously are coming out of the gates hot. So I think it's going to, allow for some comeback opportunities for teams that are down by a few goals. It allows both teams to regroup and, sort of reevaluate, what the last quarter was all about and where they need to get better. So I think it's definitely going to heighten the competition, and I think I'm excited for it. I think it's cool. It definitely will be a little bit more like men's lacrosse, but I think, women's lacrosse is becoming way more of a possession battle of possessions. And, with the shot clock that was added a few years ago, that's sort of what sparked it. But I think with quarters now, it just sort of, it makes each minute that much more important. And I think it makes each possession that much more important. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see how it works out.
I'm excited as well. Once again, I really agree with what you said about how each timeout can be a momentum changer, builder, however you want to look at it. And so with the quarters, this was going to be 3 extra timeouts after the first quarter, second, and third quarter. So that's going to be very interesting. You have some teams that get off to fast starts in games and they just kind of sit on that the rest of the game. So now with the extra timeouts, especially in the first half, I feel like that will allow the teams that don't get off to a fast start, or that maybe don't have the talent to just win from start to finish. That will give them a chance to stay in games longer and give them a chance to pull upsets. So we might see a few more upsets. We still need a little more parity in the sport before we see too many more upsets, I would say. But so that'll be very interesting. It's really, I feel like, kind of going off what I just said, I feel like for teams that aren't as good, they're going to be liking this more than teams that are good, because if Maryland's up 10-0 in the first 15 minutes of every game, they don't want a timeout, when they're playing lesser competition. Neither does VC or North Carolina. They just want to keep playing and like keep the bleeding going. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But of all the rule changes that they made, I feel like this one I'm most okay with. I would still prefer the halves, but I can see it both ways. So of the other rule changes, are there any ones that you're like, no, I don't like that?
Um, I don't think any of them I was like, no, I don't like it. I think the free start below, what was it, below the GLE, they made that one. I think that's going to be interesting because I don't know, they must be getting rid of like going to the dot and stopping play. I guess that's sort of what that means, I guess. Um, but I think it's cool because it allows the defense, like, sometimes takes that as an opportunity to reset and, like, get on the same page if the offense has to stop and wait for the whistle. So I think it's gonna force the defensive units to sort of like be ready, and they can't use that time to resit, like, sort of resituate, I guess. But no, none of them I was really like, no, I'm not a huge fan of. But are there any you? I have a feeling you didn't like some of the other ones.
Okay. Okay, I'll start with one that I didn't not like, but I didn't like either. It was one I was more confused on. If you can hear my dogs in the background, I'm sorry. They're just want to be tough guys. So, anyways, the stick check change is something I'm a little confused about. So, if you read the official release from the NCAA and the Women's Lacrosse Rules Committee, they said that these rules were all designed to make the game more efficient and to eliminate unnecessary stoppages. So with the stick checks, eliminating them before the games, I'm not really sure how that makes the games more efficient or eliminate stoppages, because those are before the games. For broadcasted games, those are done before the broadcast starts. So I'm a little confused on that. And one former player told me that it's like they eliminated half the stick check rule because they're not no longer going to be checking sticks for anyone that doesn't score. But then for people that do score, they still get their stick checks. So it's like defenders, will they be playing with illegal sticks more often now because they're not getting their sticks checked unless they score, you know? So I just I have a lot of questions about that. And obviously you're a defender and you're fresh off the scene. So what do you think about checking the sticks for only goal scorers and not the entire team?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, that's definitely an interesting point. I'd be interested to see if, defenders do start playing with um, illegal sticks. I think there's also, a bit of risk with that because I don't know if I think, there's still random stick checks allowed during the game. And, for those games that are tied or close, I think, that's a huge game changing call is if some people do go to check or do most often check defenders sticks because they're not checked by the referees as often. So, I mean, at least coming from my perspective, I still think that's, I would still keep my stick legal because I wouldn't want, to be the reason why in a close game, the other team
That would
starts with
suck.
the ball. Yeah. So, but that also doesn't happen too often. Only in close games, really, do coaches decide to call stick checks. So, that is going to be interesting, and I think changing that rule is going to cause some disagreements. But yeah, definitely the ones who are scoring the most will continue to get their stick checks, and which is the right thing, obviously. But yeah, for defenders, I don't know. It's going to be a different game. It's going to add a different element to the game for sure.
Do you think that they should have removed the stick checks altogether, or do you think that the stick checks are a necessary part of the game to prevent illegal sticks and people, for lack of a better word, or maybe this is the proper word, but to prevent people from cheating?
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, I definitely think that, it's risky. And I do think that stick checks, should happen, especially within the draw circle, right? There's a lot of tweaking to the sticks that the face-off girls use in order to, maybe give them an advantage. So I think, in that sense, it's definitely important. And I think for midfielders and attackers, there's the people, they're always changing their sticks. They're always, making sure their sticks are perfect to throw and to catch and to shoot. So I definitely think they're necessary, and obviously they'll keep the in-game stick checks after they score. But yeah, I do think that, they should have kept the full checking all the sticks on the bench. I think, yeah, like you said, it doesn't affect the efficiency of the game once it starts. It's all before. So, yeah, I was definitely scratching my head at that one though.
All right, so sticking with the rules, obviously, we have about 6 minutes left, and I don't know if this can be answered in 6 minutes. Um, but Gary Gate came out last season. He wasn't the only one, but he came out and said sticks shouldn't be checked after a goal is scored. It's silly. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't need to be checked. They don't check the men's sticks after they score. So why do you need to check the women's sticks? And so with that, it's like because of the stick checks after goals, it allows for certain types of celebration. Obviously, you played with Charlotte North, and she just likes to slide hers down a little bit. Then you
Mm-hmm.
have a player every once in a while that'll just chuck it, which is hilarious. And a lot of people do the stick slam, thinking they're Rob Gronkowski. And so there's a lot of good that comes from it because of the celebration. But then it's also like, do we really need to check them after every single goal? So what are your thoughts on if that obviously that's going to continue this season from what we know, but do you think long term that'll stay, or would you like to see it change? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. I'd have to agree with you. I sort of like it, and like you said, I think it it allows for those celebrations, and also it takes time to reset the draw too, right? Like everyone's walking back, so I don't think it's the stick check that necessarily slows down, the pace of the game and resetting. I think by the time everybody's back up to the draw circle, the stick's already checked anyway. Um, so I mean, I think it should stay, and but do I think it's going to? No, I think in a few years they're going to get rid of it. Also, if they this year they just got rid of the full team stick check. I think this is soon to go also in the next couple of years. But like I said before, I think that you do have, offensive players who tweak their sticks just a little bit, the stringing just a little bit to allow themselves, a half a centimeter even of more of a pocket. So I think it should stay. I'm for it, and I don't think it takes up that much time anyway. But I could see it both ways too, if people think that it sort of slows down the game. But
For sure. So you kind of mentioned this, and when it comes to slowing down games and length of games, personally, I watching as many games as I did this past season from different conferences, different levels of teams, I didn't feel like the game had unnecessary stoppages. I mean, with two halves of lacrosse, it's not like we have a commercial break, commercial timeouts. I think for the for nationally televised games on ESPN2, ESPNU, they would have the under 20 and under 10 or under 15 timeout, something like that. Don't quote me on that specifically, but they would have certain TV timeouts. But most games aren't nationally televised. Most are just on ESPN3 or on the school's YouTube channel, whatever. So I didn't think there were a lot of unnecessary stoppages. It's not like the NFL where they go to commercial after every drive, pretty much, or baseball, they go to commercial after every half inning. There's so many commercials. I don't understand some of the logic with some of the rules being changed, like the clock continuing to run on fouls below GLE and above the 8-meter arc. Because if you go and look at the game times, which all the major schools and pretty much all schools have this on their website. If you go to the box score, they'll have the duration of the games. In most schools, the games are less than 2 hours long. And so that's a good time frame, so there aren't that many stoppages. And then you go to the AU Pro Lax and they're having 8-minute quarters. So 32 minutes of lacrosse versus 60 minutes. And they're going like an hour and a half, an hour, 45 minutes for way less lacrosse because they're adding commercial breaks. So I feel like, I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense right now, but I just feel like some of these rules I don't think were necessary right now. Not that I'm saying we should be reactive versus proactive in the rules and changing things, but I'm just a little, I don't know if they're trying to make the game more efficient, but I feel like the game is the best it's ever been. So I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking now.
No, I agree. I don't think they were all necessary at this point. I think one thing that sort of, in a sense, slows down the game, I've talked about this with some of my teammates before, is the draw being set up. Like the center circle girls are all trying to, get a certain advantage and leverage their stick, and the refs like pushing their bottom hands down and aligning with their hips and all that. So I don't know if this would ever be considered, but I think it would add a cool element to the game, doing like sort of a hockey type face-off rule. So if the two center circle girls are sort of like going back and forth and they're both trying to cheat and the ref's yelling at both of them, sometimes the ref even has to take the ball out and take a step back and then reset. And I think that, that's sometimes like frustrating for people who are behind the restraining line. They're like, okay, like any day now, the draw going to be set up. So I think, a couple of years down the line, it'd be cool to sort of see, two girls aren't like listening or whatever. One's trying to cheat over the other. Both of them are tossed out and two new people have to come in. I think that could be something that's really cool. I don't know. I've talked about it with some of my teammates before, but in terms of slowing down the game, I feel like that's something that definitely does.
For sure, that's a great idea. Obviously that would be great for BC, Kinsey Kent, the hockey player.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's very interesting. That's a great idea. That would be great. And the draws, sometimes I'm not gonna sit here and say like they should just get up there, drop the ball, and blow the whistle. But sometimes they do take a little long, and then if you have to redraw 2 or 3 times, it's like, So
Yeah.
yeah. So, but that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's why you go to Boston College. You're a genius, So that's great stuff right there. So just real quickly, last thought from me on the rule changes. One rule change I did like is that if an offense keeps possession during their offensive possession, whether it's off a missed shot or shot goes off the pipe, goalie saves it but doesn't possess it, I do like the possession clock only resetting to 59 seconds as opposed to the full 90.
Mhm.
I think that's a good change. Um, Resetting to the full 90, especially when it comes to the end of games, it can really lessen the intensity because then the offense can just run out the clock more. And I feel like if there's anything that I would like to see changed is less running out the clock at the end of games, but I totally understand that's part of it. That's not something like I hate. It's just if I could pick something to change a little bit, that would probably be it. So I do like that. Any final thoughts from you on the rule changes?
Mhm. No, I think it's gonna be exciting to see how they, all sort of impact the game. And I agree. I think as a defender, I definitely like that the 59-second reset. Also, I think it's disheartening sometimes for defensive units. If the ricochets off the pipe, the goalie just doesn't get it, and they're already looking at a full 90. And I think that it does allow for them to the offense to stall. But no, I think it's going to be cool. And the game's constantly evolving. There's always rule changes. So the game, sometimes they grow the game, sometimes they don't. Everybody's has their own opinions of it, but I'm excited to see how everything plays out.
For sure. Okay, so that was episode 3 of The Player and the Journalist. Jillian Reilly showed why she goes to why she went to Boston College. Genius. Um, so yes, that's episode 3. We will be back in 2 weeks for episode 4. Submit some topics to us, DM us on Instagram or DM Lacrosse Extras so you can decide what we talk about because we're doing this for the fans, obviously. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back next time.